When you step into a forest before dawn, before the world has begun its noisy rehearsals of purpose and identity, there is a kind of hush that isn't empty, but full. Not the fullness of sound or thought, but of potential, of the intimate murmur of things just before they reveal themselves. That is where we begin, at the edge of awareness, in the gentle hush before meaning. To enter the still stream is not to wade into something with resistance, but rather to surrender to what already flows beneath everything we think we must push through. The stream is always there. We are the ones who forget how to float. In the beginning, there is no story, only breath, a breath that arrives like an unnoticed guest. It does not announce itself with flair, nor demand to be understood. It comes quietly, and if we do not try to grasp it, it teaches us everything. Each Zen story you are about to hear, each parable and poem disguised as an encounter or a silence, is carried on this breath, a single pulse of the still stream, timeless, unhurried, undemanding. We begin here because the beginning is never about doing. It is about undoing, unlayering. We let the noise fall away like snow melting into a spring river. The stories do not teach us in the way school books instruct, nor do they wrap lessons in bows of logic. They drift, they spiral, they circle back not to repeat, but to echo like wind over the rim of a mountain bowl. Perhaps you've come here with a cluttered heart, a mind bruised by too many tabs open, too many roles to perform. Or perhaps you're simply curious. That too is a beautiful entry. Whatever you carry, place it beside you now. It will still be there if it's meant to be. But for this moment, allow the current to hold you, not to erase what you are, but to soften what you are not. In Zen, the stream often appears in metaphor, the river that does not resist the stone, the mountain brook that babbles to no audience, the silent lake that reflects everything without judgment. These waters are not merely scenic, they are mirrors, and mirrors do not speak, they show. So we begin not with a grand tale, but a gesture, a stepping in. The stories will arrive soon, like dragonflies skimming the surface of a pond, brief, beautiful, and deeply stirring if you are still enough to notice them. But now feel this space. Hear the soft pulse of your own breath. It may seem ordinary. It is not, it is the door. There is a practice among some ancient calligraphers of dipping the brush into ink and waiting, not writing, not even thinking of the character to come, just feeling the weight of the brush, the moisture of the ink, the silence before movement. That is this moment. The ink is wet, the brush is poised, the page is vast. There's a kind of generosity in the way Zen stories invite you. They do not shout, they do not explain. They don't even ask to be remembered. Instead, they offer themselves like pebbles tossed into water. You do not need to trace every ripple, only to witness the way they disturb and deepen the stillness. As we step into the flow of these 25 stories, you may find that some pass over you like wind, gentle and gone. Others may catch in your ribs and echo through sleepless nights. This is not something you need to control. In fact, it cannot be controlled. That is the secret rhythm of the still stream. It carries what needs to be carried, and it releases what needs to be let go. Imagine a paper boat placed on a quiet stream. No map, no destination, only the tender truth that it is afloat, moving in harmony with something far greater than itself. This is how we begin. Not knowing, not naming. You may feel tempted as we journey deeper to search for meaning in every detail. That is natural, but meaning in Zen is not dug out, it is breathed in. A glance, a gesture, a silence so long it becomes music. These are the textures of what is to come. Already, the mind may be softening, the body breathing in more deeply than it has in hours, perhaps days. That is the stream. Not because of what it teaches, but because of what it does not demand. You don't need to fix anything here. You don't need to be anyone other than the one listening. The stories will ask strange things of you. They may ask you to be still when you want to act, They may lead you in circles only to bring you back to where you started, changed in ways you can't quite name. Trust that. It is not a detour, it is the path. And so we begin, not with the first story, but with the quiet readiness to receive it. No armor, no agenda, only the still stream and your breath, which is already enough. There is a reason Zen stories do not shout. They arrive softly, like the hush before snowfall, like the shadow of a crane across moonlit water. They do not explain themselves with urgency or present their meaning with rigid outlines. Instead, they whisper. And what they whisper, if you are very still, very quiet, touches something so old in you, it feels like remembering rather than learning. Why do these stories speak not to the thinking mind, but to the soul that lies beneath it? Perhaps because they know the difference. The intellect demands clarity, precision, control, but the soul listens in curves. It follows mystery not to conquer it, but to be softened by it. Zen stories were never meant to be academic. They were meant to be lived through. They are not puzzles to be solved, but mirrors held up in moonlight, where sometimes, just sometimes, what is reflected is not your face but your essence. Imagine for a moment a riddle spoken through the lips of a monk who has not spoken in days. The words fall like drops of dew on a leaf, and you don't rush to catch them. You watch them collect. You wait. That waiting is the teaching. The not knowing is the doorway. Why do they whisper? Because the truth they carry is shy. It hides from ambition. It recoils from noise. It needs a listener who has stopped trying to be clever and has instead begun to wonder again, like a child watching dust in a beam of afternoon light. Zen stories slip past the armor of explanation. They bypass the part of you that seeks answers and instead awaken the part of you that already knows, not in language, not in steps or formulas, but in silence, in presence, in the way a mountain simply is, needing no justification for its being. There's an old tale of a master who held up a single flower and said nothing. Most disciples were baffled. One smiled. That smile became the story. A flower, a pause, a smile. No conclusion, just a whisper passed from heart to heart for generations. Not less than truth, more. When we encounter these parables, they seem simple, even slight. A monk meets a beggar, a thief is offered tea, a student asks a question and is met with a slap or with silence. But these moments are carefully carved from the fabric of lived presence. They are small stones dropped in vast water, whose ripples take years to reach the shore. And sometimes the whisper is not in the words, but in the space between them. A well-placed pause, a gesture, a breath drawn and never exhaled in the story itself. But somehow you feel it in your own chest. It is said that Zen stories were meant to surprise the mind out of its loops. Not through drama or spectacle, but through subtle, precise disorientation. You think you're reading a story about generosity, but suddenly it's about ego, or about nothing at all. You think the punchline is around the corner, but the punchline is you realizing you were looking for one. This is why they linger, why they whisper, because their echoes aren't in the ears, but in the inner chambers of the self. The soul doesn't need to be convinced, it only needs to be remembered. That's what these stories do. They knock gently on the door of your deeper knowing. They don't tell you what's behind the door. They just remind you it's still there, and there is warmth in that. Not the warmth of loud certainty, but the warmth of a fire in the next room, casting soft flickers of light beneath the doorframe. You don't need to throw the door open. Just sit close, feel its glow, let it soak into your bones. Even now, as you hear these words, notice what is rising in you, not as thought, but as atmosphere. A gentle spaciousness, perhaps, a loosening in the chest, a stillness that was always waiting beneath the noise. That is the beginning of what these stories offer. Not more noise, but a space to rest between the waves. In a world constantly seeking attention, Zen stories make no demand. They don't compete. They drift like blossoms on a stream, inviting you to slow down enough to witness their quiet choreography. And sometimes, they show you something unbearable in its beauty. A monk letting go of all he has, smiling in the snow, a question that remains unanswered for 40 years, and in the silence, transformation. These aren't moral lessons. They are cones, enigmatic sparks that burn away the fog between what you think you are and what you actually are. They whisper because they respect you, because they trust that the deepest part of you doesn't need explanation. Only resonance, only space, only the soft truth of a breath exhaled fully, without resistance. So if you find your mind trying to trap these stories, to hold them down, let that go. Let them drift. Let them blur the lines between story and silence, between speaker and listener. Let them be what they are, not maps, but invitations. And let yourself be what you are too. Not a seeker of truth, but its resting place. This is why Zen stories whisper to the soul, because that's where they've always belonged. There is a peculiar kind of listening that happens only when the surface goes still, not when we try to listen, not with effort or intent, but when something inside us becomes quiet enough to notice what's always been sounding beneath the surface. To listen with the space between thoughts is not the same as hearing. Hearing is mechanical. Listening is surrender, and the space between thoughts, that rare, breath-like silence, is the temple in which true listening takes place. In Zen, silence is never empty. It is not a void to be feared or filled, but a living presence. Silence is the breath of the moment itself, exhaling its essence into the attentive heart. And it is within this silence that the stories begin to echo. If you were to stand on the edge of a great lake just as dawn breaks, you might notice how your breathing sinks to the stillness. Your pulse slows, not because you've commanded it to, but because something quieter has taken the lead. In that moment, you are not thinking, you are listening, not to the splash of a fish or the rustle of reeds, but to the vast, invisible presence that contains them all. Zen calls us to that kind of listening, not with our ears, but with the soft animal of our awareness, the part of us that existed before language, the part that leans in when a story is told in a whisper, not because it's quiet, but because it's sacred. What arises between thoughts is not blankness, it is invitation. An invitation to meet the world without commentary, to feel presence without condition. Between two thoughts, like two waves parting, there is the still water. It is in that stillness that understanding takes root, not the kind you can write down. The kind that blooms wordlessly, like light growing in a cave. Many Zen stories work like stones dropped into this stillness. Their meaning is not carried in the splash, but in the widening rings that follow. And we can only notice those rings if we are still, if we are quiet, if we are listening from the space between. A master once said, "When the mouth is open, the mind is closed, not in judgment, not in command, but in gentle reminder, because it is so easy to speak over the mystery, to fill the air with analysis. But what if, instead, we simply waited? What if we let the story finish not at the last word, but in the silence that follows it? In that pause, something remarkable happens. The story doesn't end, it unfurls. Like incense smoke trailing toward a ceiling it will never reach. The story keeps speaking not in words, but in the quiet realization it leaves behind. We are taught, often from an early age, to fill space, to speak when there is silence, to think when there is uncertainty. But Zen gently reverses the lens. It teaches us to empty, to listen, to trust the unknown as a valid teacher. The space between thoughts becomes less like a gap and more like a garden, one that grows only when untended. Even now, if you soften your attention, you may begin to feel it, not as something dramatic, but as a subtle widening inside, a loosening of the grip that thoughts usually have on you, that gentle drift into stillness. That's the space we speak of. And in that space, the stories take root, not as lessons, but as companions. It is in this rare quality of listening that transformation becomes possible. Because when we stop interrupting the moment begins to speak. Not loudly, not in a language we can capture, but with the tenderness of breath on skin, with the stillness of light through paper doors. And so, before we step into the next story, before the next wave arrives, allow yourself this space, this tiny trembling pause. It needs no effort, only permission. Between your last thought and your next, something ancient stirs. It doesn't need to be named. Just listen to. There was once a young monk, barely past boyhood, who trained at a temple known not for its grandeur, but for the silence that lived in its walls. He swept the stone floors each morning, before the sun touched the sky, bowed before empty halls, and moved like a shadow beside his teacher, an old master whose gaze carried more teaching than his tongue ever did. One day, while drawing water from the well, the young monk slipped. The heavy bucket pulled him hard, and in a swift, sickening crack, his right hand shattered against the stone rim. He was taken in by the elders, his hand carefully wrapped and bound, but his spirit grew restless. For weeks he could not perform the temple's rituals. He could not bow with symmetry. He could not offer tea with grace. Worst of all, he could no longer perform the sword forms. Those flowing dances of motion and emptiness that had so deeply captured his devotion. He came to the master in the middle of the night, under a sky so thick with stars it looked as though the heavens had opened 1,000 small eyes. "Master," he said quietly, his voice catching, "I cannot serve like this. I am broken. I cannot even draw the blade." The master looked at him, not with pity but with a strange, glowing stillness. "Then do not draw the blade," the master said. "Let the blade draw you." The boy blinked. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. The master turned and disappeared into the darkness, like mist folding into mist. Weeks passed. The pain in his hand dulled, but something more subtle began to shift. In the courtyard he began to move again, not with sword in hand but with emptiness. No blade, no posture to uphold, just breath and the lingering memory of movement. He closed his eyes and felt the air against the space where his hand used to lead. He followed it. He became the shape the sword would have made, and something strange happened. Those who watched him felt a stillness deeper than the practiced motions of the others. His movements were incomplete by form, but whole by presence. His absence became his offering. They began to say that when he moved, it was as if a hand appeared where none existed. They called it the hand that vanished. But it was not vanishing from lack. It was vanishing into the fullness of what could not be grasped. In time, even the master would bow when the boy, now a man, moved through the garden at dusk. This is not a story about loss. Or perhaps, more truthfully, it is, but not the kind of loss that diminishes. This is the kind of loss that clears a space, the way autumn strips the tree so winter sunlight can reach its roots. In Zen, we do not seek perfection. We do not seek symmetry. We seek what is real, and what is real often begins where something has been let go. The vanished hand becomes a mirror for our own lives. What part of you have you judged as broken? What skill? What dream? What feature have you buried under the quiet shame of not being enough? Zen doesn't fix you. It doesn't glue back the broken porcelain. It asks instead, can you see the crack as a path? Can you move as if your wound was the very gateway to grace? In the language of the heart, absence is not emptiness. It is space. And in that space, something unseen can move. Something that has no form, and yet gives form to everything it touches. What the young monk discovered was not a workaround. It was a transformation. The sword did not define him. The absence of the sword did. And in that void he found the deepest cut, not the one that injures, but the one that opens. If you listen gently to this story, you may feel it speaking to a place in you, that has long stopped trying. A part that grew quiet after disappointment, after illness, after change. But perhaps, just perhaps, that silence was not a death. It was the beginning of your next gesture, one that doesn't rely on what you once had, but on who you have become in its absence. The world will ask for your performance. Zen invites your presence, and presence does not require a full hand, only a full heart. So when the stories drift onward, as they soon will, carry this one softly. Let it echo in the quiet chambers of your own unfolding. Ask not what you can hold, but how you can be held by what remains. For the most beautiful movements often come from the places we thought had vanished. There is a small courtyard in the hills outside Kyoto, where the stones are laid with such care that even the moss between them seems to bow. In the center of this courtyard rests a simple wooden bowl, hand-carved, rim-worn smooth by time, its belly darkened by years of exposure to sun, snow, and silent observation. No one speaks of the bowl, but it is always there. And when it rains, the bowl fills. It's said that one evening, a monk in training noticed the bowl brimming after a long, steady rain. He went to the old master and asked, "Shall I empty it?" The master looked up from his tea, then turned his gaze toward the bowl in the courtyard. After a long pause, he simply said, "Only if it forgets how to be filled." The student waited, unsure whether the answer was permission or riddle. But the master said no more, just sipped and watched the rain begin again. This is the story of the bowl and the rain. And as with all Zen stories, its simplicity holds depth, not unlike rain held by a vessel, clear, quiet, and reflective. We live in a world obsessed with pouring, with filling up, our calendars, our resumes, our shopping carts, our minds. We gather knowledge like possessions, accumulate moments like trophies, and when there's space, we rush to fill it. Stillness, to many, is emptiness, and emptiness, in the modern mind, is deficiency. But the bowl doesn't seek to be filled. It simply waits. Its purpose is not in the act of catching the rain, but in its readiness to receive it. The bowl is not trying. It is not longing. It is not anxious about when the next drop will fall. It just is, present, open, and perfectly content in its purpose. Rain in this story is not merely weather. It is life itself, unpredictable, rhythmic, generous, and like rain, insight arrives in droplets, sometimes soft, sometimes sudden, sometimes not at all. But the bowl does not chase the clouds. It does not climb to meet the storm. It waits, shaped by emptiness. Zen teaches that the mind, too, is a vessel. But most of the time, we rush to fill it before it has space to receive. We fear being unoccupied, undefined, unproductive. So we crowd the bowl with commentary, assumptions, beliefs, until there's no room left for fresh water, for new rain. The bowl reminds us that receptivity is not passivity. It is discipline. It is trust. To remain open without agenda, to remain empty without urgency, is an act of quiet courage. And when the rain does come, when the insight arrives, when the story lands, when the breath finds its rhythm again, it is not because we forced it, but because we were ready. There is something sacred in the moment after the bowl is filled. That perfect, glistening tension between abundance and stillness. Not overflowing, not lacking, just enough. And in that enoughness, we are reminded that wholeness has never required more. The student who asked whether to empty the bowl was not wrong. We often feel responsible for managing everything, even nature's offerings. But the master's reply, that cryptic answer about forgetting, echoes more deeply than logic can reach. It asks us, what if the point is not to empty, but to remember? What if the bowl knows when to hold and when to spill, simply by being true to its shape? In this way, the bowl is not only a receiver, but a teacher. It teaches us to hold without clutching, to be full without arrogance, to be empty without fear. It teaches us to wait, not with expectation, but with presence. To listen not only to what falls into us, but to the silence between each drop. And perhaps most profoundly, it teaches us that we do not need to chase clarity. We only need to be shaped in such a way that clarity can land when it chooses. Let this story be a soft mirror. Let it ask you gently, what is your bowl full of right now? What rain are you ready for, but cannot yet feel, because your vessel is already overflowing? To live in alignment with the bowl is to slow down enough to notice the arrival of nourishment, to know that the wisdom we seek does not always arrive in floods. Sometimes drips steadily, softly, until it gathers in us like rainwater in a quiet place, cool, clear, and sufficient. And sometimes when it's full, all we must do is sit beside it and watch the reflection shimmer on its surface. There are some smiles that do not appear for the sake of kindness or humor or ease. They do not belong to the social world at all. They arise like sunlight catching the edge of a leaf, quiet, effortless, and deeply unprovoked. Such was the smile of the master. He was old by the time the story begins, not feeble. No, something in him felt untouched by time. But his skin had folded into itself like the bark of a weathered tree, and his gaze had a kind of distance that only comes from years of looking inward. The temple where he lived sat on the edge of a mountain path, half hidden by wisteria vines and mist. Travelers passed through often, some seeking answers, others hoping for miracles. A few simply curious about the old man, who was said to sit in the garden without moving for hours, sometimes days. What puzzled the novices most wasn't his silence. Silence could be expected in Zen practice, nor was it his sparse way of life, or the way he rarely used his hands, except to tend to a single bonsai pine that grew in a shallow clay bowl. No, what confounded them, what lingered in the air like the scent of plum blossoms, was his smile. It was barely a smile at all. No broad curve of the mouth, no sparkle in the eye to invite others in. It hovered like mist on still water, present, but elusive. The kind of smile that raised questions rather than answered them. Once, a student asked him directly, "Master, why do you smile when no one speaks?" The old man paused for a long time, watching a bee drift between blossoms. Finally, he whispered, "Because the silence speaks back. There is a peculiar kind of joy that Zen cultivates. It is not the loud joy of celebration, nor the sweet joy of triumph. It is the kind that slips in when nothing is expected, when everything unnecessary has been laid down. It is not pleasure, it is presence." And the smile of the master was that presence made visible. We spend much of our lives searching for reasons to smile. We tie it to outcomes, to moments of relief, to the warmth of company or the taste of beauty. But Zen asks us, gently, what would it mean to smile not because of something, but within something? The master's smile wasn't reaction, it was recognition, not of others, not even of himself, but of suchness. The Zen term for the is-ness of a thing. The flower blooming, not for praise, the wind shifting, not to be known, the breath returning without needing instruction. All of it just so, just this. In the records kept by visiting monks, it's said that the master never smiled during formal teachings. He spoke rarely, and when he did, it was often with the clarity of a stone dropped into a still pond. But in the early mornings, when the temple garden was veiled in fog, those who rose early enough could catch a glimpse of him, seated beneath the cherry tree, hands resting in his lap, gazing into nothing in particular and smiling. That smile became its own teaching. One visitor, a scholar from the city, came to the temple and demanded a lesson. He offered the master a list of philosophical questions, none of which were answered. Frustrated, the scholar exclaimed, "If you refuse to speak, how do you teach at all?" The master said nothing. He simply turned his face slightly toward the sun breaking through the trees and smiled. And in that moment, something loosened in the scholar, an old knot perhaps, a burden made of intellect and striving. His tears came without reason. What moved him was not the content of an answer, but the presence of something whole. something that did not seek to prove itself or to be understood, but simply to be. This is the kind of nourishment Zen stories offer, not through grand epiphanies, but through subtleties so delicate they often pass unnoticed. The master's smile was not a lesson in behavior, but in being. Not an invitation to imitate, but to remember. To remember that peace is not the absence of trouble, but the recognition of a stillness underneath it. To remember that sometimes the deepest truths are not told, but felt. And to remember that we are allowed, more than allowed, invited, to smile for no reason at all. That even in the face of uncertainty, even within sorrow, there may arise a quiet warmth that asks for no permission to glow. So let this story sit with you, not as a parable to decode, but as a presence to breathe with. Let the master's smile live in the corner of your own mouth when you next sit in silence. Let it soften the spaces between your thoughts. Let it remind you that you, too, can rest inside the moment, not because it is perfect, but because it is. There is no conclusion here, just a simple truth whispered without words. Sometimes the greatest teaching is a smile that needs no cause. In the quiet center of an old temple hall, where the floors creak just slightly under bare feet and incense lingers like memory, there once sat a single candle, lit each night at dusk by the youngest monk. It was part of the evening ritual, the soft sweep of the broom across the stones, the bell rung once, and the candle's flame, offered into darkness like a bow without words. The candle was not large, its light barely reached the far corners of the hall, but each night it was enough. It illuminated what mattered, the hands in prayer, the breath rising from folded robes, the still faces turned gently inward. And then, one evening, the wind came. Not a storm, just a wandering breeze, slipping through a paper screen left slightly ajar. The candle flickered, and the monk who had lit it turned, startled. He reached to shield the flame with his hand, but the master raised a finger. Wait. The boy stilled, and they watched, just watched, as the flame bent and danced. First tall, then narrow, then sputtering, then steady again. The candle did not go out, not that night. In the days that followed, the wind returned again and again, sometimes playful, sometimes persistent. Each time the monk instinctively reached to protect the flame, and each time the master gently stopped him. Let it meet the wind, he said one evening, his voice like the whisper of dry leaves. That is how the flame learns. The boy frowned. But if it goes out, the master closed his eyes. Then we light it again, and we begin. This is the story of the candle and the wind. And like all Zen stories, it is not about candles or wind, or even monks and masters. It is about us, about the flickering center of being, and the forces that bend us. Each of us carries a flame. It might not be visible, it might not even feel strong, but it burns, quietly, within, the part of us that seeks truth, that longs for peace, that continues even when the world presses against it. And life is wind. It gusts and shifts without warning. It changes direction. Sometimes it arrives through the smallest opening, unexpected, uninvited. A word said sharply, a change in plans, a loss, subtle or profound. And like the flame, we flicker, we waver, we question whether we will endure. But this story reminds us flickering is not failing. The flame that bends does not die, it adapts. It learns to move with the moment, not against it. To surrender its rigidity and find a deeper rhythm. When we try to shield ourselves from every gust, every challenge, every discomfort, we may think we are protecting our peace. But often, we are only stifling it, wrapping it in a glass so tight that it lacks the air it needs to breathe. The master knew this. He understood that the candle's relationship with the wind was not one of opposition, but of dialogue. And perhaps this is true for us as well. The forces that shake us can also shape us. The same wind that causes a flame to flicker can teach it how to dance. It is easy to believe that stillness means no movement, that peace means no disturbance. But Zen invites us into a different kind of calm, a calm that includes motion, a stillness that embraces change and does not panic when the air shifts. The candle and the wind are not enemies. They are partners in a quiet dance. One teaches persistence, the other humility. There is a moment in this story that lives in the pause. The boy's hand hovering, the master's gaze steady, the flame dipping low but never quite vanishing. That is the moment worth returning to. That inhale of awareness before reaction. That brief suspension of habit. That is the heart of practice. Because sometimes the true lesson is not in preventing the flame from faltering, but in trusting that it will rise again. You may feel this in your own life. Times when your light feels fragile, when the world feels too large, too shifting, too cold. But remember, your flicker does not mean you are broken. It means you are alive. Let this story remind you gently, you do not need to hold perfectly still to be at peace. You only need to remain lit. And if the wind does come, as it always does, welcome it. Feel its movement. Let it swirl through your thoughts, your fears, your hopes. Let it teach your flame something new. And if one evening your light does go out, do not fear. There is always the match of your breath, the kindness of your attention, the presence of this moment waiting to begin again. You are the candle, you are the wind, and you are the space where they meet. There is a path behind the temple, worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet, its stones polished not by hands, but by the soft insistence of daily return. It wends gently through a bamboo grove, past a quiet stream, and ends at a flat stone large enough to sit on, or lie upon, or do nothing at all. Monks walk this path every day, slowly, silently, one step, one breath. They are not walking to arrive, they are walking to walk. But one afternoon a young monk paused, just one pause. Not from fatigue or uncertainty or distraction. He simply stopped mid-step, his sandal hovering above the earth. His gaze drifted to the space between one footprint and the next. The other monks moved past him like reeds in wind, undisturbed. The teacher, who had been walking a few paces behind, approached and stopped beside him. "Why did you stop?" the teacher asked softly. The monk lowered his foot but did not place it down. "I felt something," he said, in the space between steps, like the world was listening. The teacher nodded once. "It always is. We just forget to pause long enough to hear it." And they stood there, both feet touching the earth now, in a silence so full it felt like being held. This is the story of a pause between footsteps. And it is not just about stillness. It is about presence, the kind that lives in the spaces we usually rush through. We move through our days like sentences without commas, always racing toward the period, toward completion. We fill time the way we fill suitcases, anxious to pack enough to feel prepared, safe, accomplished. But Zen invites us into a different rhythm, a rhythm shaped not by accumulation, but by awareness. The pause between steps is not a delay, it is the heartbeat of walking. Without it, every footfall is just a collapse into the next. But with it, there is breath, there is noticing, there is space for being. In traditional Zen practice, walking meditation is more than a technique. It is a living metaphor. Each step is a world, each pause is a door, and through those doors we meet ourselves. Not the version wrapped in tasks or wrapped in thoughts, but the quiet watcher, the witness, the sky behind the clouds. Think of how often we move on autopilot, how rarely we pause, not because we are tired, but because we remember we are alive. The monk's step, suspended in air, is a mirror for every moment we choose presence over momentum. What would it mean to walk like that? To live like that? Not to halt our lives entirely, but to walk with gentleness, to invite small pauses into the stream of our doing, between bites, between words, between thoughts. It is in these pauses that we begin to feel the texture of time, not as something to conquer, but as something to touch. A warm bowl held between our palms, a hush just before music begins. There is a Zen saying, when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. Above all, don't wobble. But maybe the pause is not wobbling. Maybe it is the deepest form of balance. The willingness to be neither here nor there, but gently, wholly in between. Some of the most transformative moments in life arrive not when we arrive somewhere new, but when we stop long enough to realize we are already somewhere sacred. A child's laugh, a breeze that smells of rain, the glance of someone you love, unplanned, unspoken. These moments live between footsteps. The story of the monk and his pause is small, but so is a single snowflake, so is a drop of water, and yet with enough of them a world is reshaped. So let us return to that path behind the temple. Imagine your own feet there. Hear the sound of sandals brushing against stone. Hear the silence that comes when all you do is notice. Let that silence widen, like the space between waves, and let that space hold you. For just one breath, release the need to go anywhere. Feel your body as it is, half movement, half miracle. Feel the earth beneath you, not a flaw, but a friend. And when you lift your foot again, let it be not just a continuation, but a return. A return to yourself, to the world, to the quiet rhythm of being. Because sometimes, the most profound clarity does not come when we reach the destination. It comes in the pause between footsteps, when we remember we are already home. It is said that a professor once traveled far to visit a Zen master known for his silence, his tea, and his refusal to flatter those who arrived seeking wisdom dressed in credentials. The professor, esteemed in his field, came carrying his knowledge like armor. He bowed formally, introduced himself with pride, and spoke rapidly of what he knew, what he had read, what he had written, and what he hoped to gain. The master listened, nodding gently, hands folded inside his sleeves. He then motioned toward a low wooden table where tea was already steeping in a clay pot, steam rising like thoughts not yet spoken. They sat. The professor continued speaking as the master poured. The tea filled the cup and then did not stop. It rose to the brim. It spilled over into the saucer and across the table's grain. Startled, the professor exclaimed, "It is overflowing! No more will go in." The master looked at him with the same calm he had shown all along. "Exactly," he said. "You are like this cup, so full there is no room for anything new. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" There's a pause after this story lands, not the silence of absence, but of recognition. We've all been the professor, arriving into conversations, relationships, even moments of self-reflection already brimming with assumption, knowledge, urgency. And like an overfilled teacup, what should nourish us instead spills, leaving nothing to hold, nothing to taste. This story is not a condemnation of learning, nor of expertise. It is not asking us to abandon what we've known. Instead, it invites us to make space around it, to allow wisdom to breathe like tea left to steep, slowly, patiently in the open bowl of awareness. There is a deep tenderness in the idea of the empty cup, not a void, not a lack, but a readiness, a kind of unknowing that leans forward, gently toward whatever comes next. In Zen, beginner's mind is not something reserved for those just starting out. It is something we cultivate again and again, even at the height of understanding, especially then, because certainty closes the door. Curiosity leaves it slightly ajar. Think of a child watching rain slide down a window. They aren't analyzing. They aren't comparing. They are with the rain, fully, with all of themselves. That too is empty cup mind, and it is harder to hold than it seems. The world rewards the full cup. It praises quick answers and strong opinions. We are taught to gather, to accumulate, to display what we know. But Zen slips through fingers closed in grasp. It only lands in the open palm. The empty teacup becomes a mirror, showing us how much we carry. Beliefs, roles, goals, fears, all sloshing close to the rim. And it asks gently what might be let go just for now, not forever, not as rejection, but as a gesture of trust. To empty your cup is to say, I do not need to arrive full. I am willing to be changed. It is to meet the present moment not as an expert, but as a guest. Even in our daily lives, the practice of emptying can be profound. Before a conversation, a breath. Before a reaction, a pause. Before a judgment, a question, what don't I yet see? It's not that we erase who we are, but we make space for more of who we could become. Like the master's teapot, the world is always offering something: beauty, insight, challenge, grace. But if our cup is already full, even those offerings become noise. Overflow. So how do we begin to empty? Perhaps not all at once, but gently, by noticing, by loosening our grip on what we think we know, by letting silence sit with us, like steam rising from a waiting cup. You don't need to discard your knowledge. You simply need to create room beside it, a quiet corner where the unexpected might land. And if one day someone pours tea into your cup and it spills over, smile. Let it run across the table. Watch it move without rushing to wipe it away. Let it teach you again that the most valuable things often arrive only after we've made space for them. Because a full cup cannot receive, but an empty one, it holds the world. There is a tale told in quiet corners of Zen monasteries about a mirror unlike any other. Not a mirror carved from polished bronze or framed in gold, but one that held no surface at all. This mirror, the story goes, could reflect nothing, no face, no form, no shadow. Yet, paradoxically, it showed everything. The story begins with a disciple who sought to understand the nature of reflection. He asked the master, "How can a mirror that has no surface show anything at all?" The master replied, "It reflects by not reflecting. It shows what does not depend on form." This mirror is a metaphor. It holds a space that is not filled by image or appearance. It does not cling to shapes, nor does it fix itself on the fleeting shadows cast by passing light. Instead, it reflects the essence behind all appearances, the silent, empty clarity from which all forms arise and to which all forms return. To grasp the meaning of the mirror with no surface, imagine the sky on a cloudless day. It is vast, clear, and boundless. It holds no shape of its own, yet every mountain, every tree, every star we see is visible only because of the clarity of the sky. Without the sky's openness, those things would lose their form and definition. The mirror invites us to consider, what if our true nature is like that sky? Without edges, without boundaries, without a fixed self to reflect or protect. In the everyday rush, we cling to reflections, our identities, our stories, our judgments, as if they are the mirror itself. We seek validation in the gaze of others or in the shifting image of success and failure. But these reflections, like ripples on water, are transient. They come and go. The mirror with no surface whispers to us that beneath these shifting images lies something constant, radiant, and utterly unobstructed. A place where the self is not a thing, but a spaciousness, an openness that allows all experiences to arise and pass without grasping or rejecting. This is the heart of Zen insight, to rest not in the reflections, but in the mirror itself, to know not the shape of who we appear to be, but the vastness of what we truly are. Imagine a calm lake in early morning, perfectly still, so that it appears as a seamless extension of the sky. The surface is a mirror without surface, transparent, reflective, without thickness or weight. Yet it holds the mountains, the trees, the clouds in perfect clarity. And if a leaf falls upon it, the image ripples, but the lake remains. So too, we are invited to be the lake, open, fluid, holding everything without becoming fixed or fragile. The mirror with no surface does not resist the passing images. It welcomes them, then lets them go, revealing again the emptiness and fullness of presence. This story calls us to loosen our grip on the familiar images of self and circumstance, to sit with the ungraspable and the unseen. It asks what remains when the reflection fades. What is left when the surface is swept away? There is a profound freedom in knowing that we are not defined by our reflections, not limited by the transient images that play upon the screen of our mind. We are the mirror itself, vast, clear, luminous, without edge. As we listen to this story, allow its paradox to settle gently within you. Feel the quiet awe that arises when we glimpse a truth that cannot be held or named, only lived. This is the invitation, to meet ourselves not as fractured images seeking wholeness, but as the whole mirror, empty, radiant, endlessly patient. And in that meeting, to find a clarity so deep it becomes a sanctuary. In a small village by the sea, there is a story told of a fish, no ordinary fish, but one who once swam freely in the boundless ocean. Its scales caught the sunlight like shards of glass, and its movements traced invisible paths known only to the currents. For the fish, the ocean was home, limitless and embracing, the very air that filled its being. One day the fish found itself caught in a fisherman's net and placed into a small, ornate bowl. The water was clear but confined, the world compressed into a fragile glass sphere. At first the fish swam as it always had, searching for the vastness it had known. But day after day it forgot the ocean. It began to believe that the bowl was all there was, that the horizon ended at its edge, that freedom was measured by the water it could move through, that life was what the bowl contained. This story is a gentle mirror held up to each of us. How often do we forget the ocean within which we live? How often do we mistake our limited surroundings for the whole? We forget that our true nature, like the ocean, is vast and deep, beyond form, beyond circumstance, beyond the small container of daily worries and roles. The fish's plight is not tragedy, but a quiet awakening waiting to happen. In Zen, the ocean is often a symbol of boundlessness, the ungraspable source of all things. It is the formless in which form appears, the great expanse that carries every wave, every drop, every ripple. And yet, like the fish, we often find ourselves caught in the nets of thought, identity, and attachment. The bowl is our mind when it narrows, when it believes that who we are is what we see reflected in small things, when it clings to the immediate and overlooks the infinite. It is easy to swim in circles inside the familiar, forgetting the freedom that comes from surrendering to the vastness. But the story does not end in confinement. One morning, after many moons, the fisherman gently lifted the fish from its bowl and released it back into the ocean. At first, the fish was hesitant. The water was cold and strange after so long in glass. Yet gradually, as the tides cradled it, the fish remembered. It remembered the swell of the sea beneath its fins, the endless dance of light and shadow, the song of the currents whispering secrets in every wave. And with that remembrance came a return not just to a place, but to a state of being. In our lives, moments come when we glimpse the ocean again, perhaps in silence, in nature, in meditation, or in sudden insight. These moments remind us that our true home is not the bowl of limitation, but the vastness that holds all. To forget the ocean is to live with boundaries drawn by fear, habit, or misunderstanding. To remember it is to find our way back to openness, to possibility, to the boundless presence that flows through us all. The fish's journey is our own, caught and released, confined and freed, lost and found. Zen does not ask us to deny the bowl. It invites us to see the bowl and the ocean together, to know that while our immediate circumstances may be small, the space within us is infinite. In that spaciousness, we can swim freely, no longer forgetting who we are. So, when you feel trapped by life's limits, by doubt or routine, remember the fish who forgot, and then remembered the ocean. Feel the call of the vast water within you, endless, welcoming, whole, and know that no matter how small the bowl may seem, the ocean awaits your return. There is an old story told beneath the trees of a quiet mountain temple, a story of a gate that vanished, not in the sense of crumbling stone or rotting wood, but in a way far more mysterious and subtle. One day, a traveler arrived at the gate, seeking passage. The gate stood tall, imposing, a threshold to something beyond. Yet when he reached out to open it, his hands found only empty air. The gate had vanished. Bewildered, the traveler stepped forward, expecting to meet a barrier or a path. But there was neither. Only the quiet forest, the soft rustle of leaves, and the open space where the gate had been moments before. This story is a paradox, a teaching wrapped in the cloak of disappearance. The gate is both there and not there, a threshold and a void, a boundary and an invitation. It calls us to question what we think defines passage, arrival, or even existence. In the hustle of our lives, we often look for gates, clear signs, decisive moments, certain answers. We seek the doors that will open to success, enlightenment, happiness. We imagine crossing a boundary, stepping through a portal that transforms us instantly. But the gate that vanished whispers a different truth. Sometimes, the boundaries we expect are illusions. The doors we wait for are shadows cast by our own desires and fears. And the moment we reach for certainty, it slips like mist between fingers. Yet this slipping is not loss, it is a teaching. The vanished gate asks us to recognize that the path itself may be the destination, that the passage may be in the willingness to move forward even when no gate appears, to step into the unknown, trusting that the way reveals itself in each step. The Zen tradition is rich with such paradoxes, cones that unsettle the mind and invite it beyond concepts. The vanishing gate is a cone in itself, inviting us to release attachment to fixed ideas about beginnings and endings, entrances and exits. Consider the forest that surrounds the traveler. The trees do not ask for passage. The wind flows freely through branches and leaves, unconfined by walls or gates. The open space where the gate once stood is not emptiness, but potential. What if the gate was never meant to be a physical object? What if it was the threshold within us, the border between grasping and letting go, between seeking and being? This story invites us to live with uncertainty, to embrace the disappearance of old certainties, and to find peace in the space where boundaries dissolve. The vanished gate does not block, it frees. It does not confine, it expands. It does not deny passage, it invites transformation. In our own journeys, we may find ourselves standing before gates that seem to vanish, relationships that change, careers that end, beliefs that dissolve. These moments can feel disorienting, even frightening, but they also hold the promise of deeper freedom. When the gate vanishes, it asks us to trust ourselves, to trust the path that appears beneath our feet, step by step. The greatest teachings often come not through opening doors, but through stepping beyond them. So let this story linger in your mind like a breath held and released, a pause that opens space. Imagine yourself as the traveler, reaching forward only to find the gate is gone. And yet you continue, into the forest, into the light, into the vast openness that awaits when boundaries disappear. In the gentle dusk of a quiet village, there is a tradition passed down through generations, the lighting of paper lanterns. Delicate constructions of rice paper and bamboo, each lantern holds a small flame, fragile and flickering, yet glowing with a soft, unwavering warmth. As night falls, villagers release these lanterns into the sky, watching them drift like glowing blossoms into the darkness, carrying wishes, memories, and quiet hopes. The story of the paper lantern is a meditation on light and vulnerability, on how something seemingly fragile can illuminate vast spaces. Imagine the lantern's paper, thin and translucent. It bends easily in the wind, easily torn, easily lost. Yet it holds a flame that moves and dances, sometimes threatened by the slightest breeze, but somehow enduring. The paper is not strength, and the flame is not force. Together, they embody a balance of surrender and resilience. This balance is at the heart of Zen teaching, the recognition that true strength is not about rigidity or resistance, but about flexibility and openness. Like the paper lantern, our lives are composed of delicate materials, shaped by experience, by loss, by hope. We may feel vulnerable, exposed, fragile. Yet within us burns a light that is both tender and radiant. The lantern's flight into the night sky is an act of trust. It surrenders to the wind and to the vastness above, not knowing where it will land or how long it will stay alight. It is an offering, an act of letting go. We live in a world that often values control, certainty, and permanence. But the paper lantern reminds us that beauty and clarity often arise from uncertainty, that the ephemeral can hold profound meaning, that letting go can be the very act that allows light to travel farthest. There is a delicate tension in the lantern's journey, the dance between the flame's desire to burn brightly and the paper's need to protect it, all held together by the gentle breath of the wind. In this tension, we glimpse the human condition, our need for shelter and our longing for freedom, our fear of impermanence and our yearning for transcendence. Zen stories invite us to lean into this tension, to embrace the fragility that makes our light possible. They ask us to recognize that vulnerability is not weakness, but a doorway to connection and clarity. Consider the lantern as a mirror. How often do we hide our light, fearing the gusts of life might extinguish it? How often do we resist the winds, forgetting that they are also the means by which our light finds new heights? The paper lantern teaches us to surrender, not passively, but with grace, to trust the unseen currents, to know that even if the flame flickers, even if the paper trembles, the light endures. And when we release the lantern, when we let our own light rise into the night, we participate in a dance older than time, one that honors both the fragility and the brilliance of being. This story lingers in the soft glow of that flame, in the quiet space between earth and sky, reminding us that even the smallest light, when carried with openness, can illuminate the vast darkness. May you carry this light gently within you, letting it shine not in spite of fragility, but because of it. Let it move with the wind, dance with the shadows, and rise into the limitless sky of your own becoming. In the quietest moments, when the world seems hushed and the usual clamor of thoughts softens into a gentle murmur, there arises a sound unlike any other, the sound of no sound. It is not silence in the absence of noise, but a presence that holds everything. The fullness of stillness vibrating beneath the surface of all that is heard and unheard. This sound is ancient and eternal, the underlying pulse beneath the symphony of existence. It is the sound of wind moving through bamboo leaves, the echo of a distant bell fading into the vastness of mountain air, the whisper of a breath held between one moment and the next. There is a story from the Zen tradition that speaks of a master and his disciple sitting beside a still pond. The disciple, restless, asked, "Master, what is the sound of no sound?" The master smiled softly and replied, "It is the music of the universe before it becomes noise. It is the breath before the word, the space before the form." The disciple sat silently, trying to hear this elusive sound. But what could be heard was only the usual, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of insects, the ripple of water. The master then gestured toward the surface of the pond, perfectly smooth and reflective. "Look," he said, "the pond reflects all things, yet it holds none. The sound of no sound is like this. It does not grasp or hold, yet it contains everything." This teaching invites us into a paradox, a way of listening that goes beyond ears, beyond external noise, into the very fabric of being. The sound of no sound is the resonance of emptiness and fullness entwined, a vibration that hums beneath the surface of all experience. It reminds us that silence is not a void to be feared, but a cradle for life's deepest truths. In that silence, our scattered thoughts settle like sediment, revealing clarity that words cannot capture. This sound teaches us about presence, not as a state to be achieved, but as a constant unfolding. It invites us to attune ourselves to the subtleties beneath the obvious, to the spaces between sounds, to the pauses that give rhythm to speech. In a world saturated with noise, literal and figurative, the sound of no sound offers a refuge. It is a place where we are not pulled by distractions or demands, but gently held in the embrace of stillness. To listen to this sound is to open to the infinite, where beginnings and endings dissolve and all distinctions fade. It is the sound that carries the birth of stars, the dance of galaxies, the quiet beating of your own heart. Through the lens of Zen, the sound of no sound becomes a gateway to awakening. It is both the question and the answer, the journey and the arrival. As you listen now, breathe softly into this space. Notice the subtle shifts, the breath entering and leaving your body, the quiet currents of sensation and thought moving like ripples across a pond. In this moment, you are both observer and observed. Sound and silence form an emptiness. You are touching the mystery that sustains all life, the vibration that sings without words. Let this sound carry you beyond the boundaries of noise and stillness alike. Let it dissolve the walls between self and other, between past and future. And in its gentle unfolding, find the restorative warmth of belonging to something vast, eternal and deeply alive. The sound of no sound is always with us. It waits in the spaces we often overlook, in the pause between heartbeats, in the hush after a sigh, in the quiet of early dawn. To hear it is to remember who we truly are, not separate and fragmented, but whole and unbounded. In a secluded grove where the earth is soft with moss and the air carries the faint scent of pine, stands a cluster of bamboo. Tall and slender, these stalks sway gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets to the sky. Bamboo, with its remarkable grace, teaches one of Zen's deepest lessons, how to be both strong and yielding, steadfast and flexible. There is an old tale of a fierce storm that swept through such a grove. Thunder roared like the voice of ancient gods, and lightning tore the sky asunder. The wind howled with relentless fury, bending trees and scattering leaves in its wake. Yet when the storm passed, the bamboo remained standing, bent low, yes, but unbroken. The great oaks and rigid pines nearby had cracked or fallen, unable to yield to the tempest's rage. The bamboo, by bending, had survived. This story is not merely about plants. It is a profound metaphor for resilience and surrender. The bamboo does not resist the storm with stiff defiance. It accepts the force, yielding without losing its essence. In doing so, it preserves itself, finding strength in softness, power in vulnerability. Life's storms come in many forms: loss, uncertainty, fear, change. We often face them like the rigid trees, bracing for impact, stiffening our resolve, trying to control what cannot be controlled. Yet this resistance can be the very thing that breaks us. Zen invites us to embody the bamboo, to meet adversity not with hardness, but with openness, to bend without breaking, to flow with the currents of experience rather than against them. Imagine standing in the storm. The wind pulls at you from every direction. The rain blurs your vision. You can either brace and resist or soften and sway. The bamboo's lesson is clear. Strength is not in standing rigid, but in moving with grace. This is not surrender as defeat. It is surrender as wisdom. The bamboo's roots are deep, its core unyielding. It is flexible on the surface because it knows where it is grounded. So too can we cultivate inner steadiness that allows outer softness. In moments of trial, when the world presses in, remember the bamboo. Let your heart bend like those slender stalks. Let your mind open to the storm's teachings. The storm may rage, but it will pass. And when it does, you will stand, still whole, still rooted, still alive. This story whispers to us in the quiet spaces between our breaths. It reminds us that life's most profound strength often comes not from resistance, but from the courage to yield, to adapt, and to trust in the unseen roots that hold us firm. May you carry this lesson gently within, like the bamboo's song carried on the wind, soft, resilient, unbreakable. The brush glides across the rice paper, releasing a river of black ink, fluid, deliberate, alive. Each stroke is a moment, a gesture, a breath made visible. In traditional calligraphy, the ink is more than pigment. It is a dance of presence and intention, a fleeting imprint of spirit on surface. There is a story from a quiet monastery about a master whose calligraphy faded with time. The ink, once deep and rich, slowly lightened until the characters became whispers on the page, barely visible, like ghosts of meaning. Visitors came, puzzled, asking if the master had lost his skill, his precision, his clarity. But the master smiled gently and said, "The ink fades, but the essence remains. True meaning is not fixed in black or white, but in the space where form dissolves into emptiness." This story invites us to look beyond permanence, beyond the solidity of what we grasp. Like the fading ink, all things in life are transient. The words we speak, the roles we play, the identities we hold, they are not etched in stone but flow like water, shifting and reshaping with each passing moment. In Zen philosophy, this impermanence is not cause for sorrow, but a gateway to freedom. The fading ink is not loss, but revelation, a reminder that meaning lies not in the marks we leave, but in the space they leave behind. Imagine holding a scroll where the words vanish before your eyes, leaving only the faintest trace of their former presence. What remains is silence, and in that silence, a deeper truth may emerge. The space between the lines, the breath between the sounds, the stillness beneath movement. The master's fading ink teaches us to embrace the ephemeral, to find beauty in the gradual dissolution of certainty. It invites us to loosen our grip on permanence and welcome the mystery of change. We often resist fading. We cling to memories, achievements, beliefs, trying to hold them steady against the tide of time. But Zen whispers another way to flow with the current, to let the ink fade gracefully, trusting that what is essential transcends form. This story is also a meditation on expression and presence. Calligraphy is not merely about creating words, it is about embodying the moment of creation, the energy, the breath, the intention. Even as the ink fades, the act remains alive in the silence it leaves behind. Our lives, too, are strokes on the vast canvas of existence. We may fear being forgotten or losing ourselves. Yet, like the ink, we are part of a greater rhythm, writing, fading, and rewriting in an endless cycle. The fading ink does not erase the master's work. It transforms it into something more subtle, more profound. It reminds us that the deepest truths are not always visible. Sometimes, they are felt in the gentle quiet that follows the fading, in the openness that welcomes what cannot be grasped. As you listen, breathe into this space, the space where ink dissolves and silence speaks. Let it soften the need for permanence, the need to define or contain. In that softness, discover restorative warmth, a gentle acceptance of the unfolding nature of all things. And remember, like the master's ink, your presence need not be bold or permanent to be meaningful. It is enough to be here, now flowing and fading in harmony with the infinite. In the heart of a mountain monastery, where the air is thin and the sky seems to stretch into infinity, stands a great bronze bell. It is old beyond measure, its surface weathered by centuries of wind and rain, its voice rich with the stories of countless dawns and dusks. This bell is not simply an instrument, it is a presence, a teacher, a breath made audible. There is a story told among the monks of how, once during a long, silent meditation, the bell was struck, not by hand, but by the soft wind itself. The sound that rose was neither loud nor abrupt. It was a gentle awakening, a ripple through the stillness that invited every listener to pause, to breathe, to return. This is the breath of the bell, a sound that is both a beginning and an end, a wave that carries and dissolves, a vibration that lingers long after the strike has ceased. The bell teaches us about presence. It asks us to listen not just with ears, but with the whole of our being. To feel the space the sound travels through, the silence that cradles it, the way it folds into the landscape and into our hearts. In Zen practice, The bell's toll marks moments of transition, between activity and rest, between thought and no thought, between one day and the next. Yet the sound itself transcends these boundaries. It is a reminder that all distinctions arise and fall within the vastness of now. Imagine standing beside the bell as it sounds. The air shivers with its resonance, the earth seems to pulse in time with its hum. The sound fills the space, yet it is not confined by it. It invites you to expand, to let go of limits, to leap into the infinite. The breath of the bell is like the breath of life itself, continuous, cyclic, essential. It calls us back to ourselves, to the rhythm that sustains us when all else falls away. There is a profound stillness in this sound, a quiet power that does not demand attention, but gently commands it. It teaches patience, the patience to wait, to listen, to be fully here. And in that patience, transformation occurs. The bell's sound is not just heard, it is felt, carried into the depths of being, where it softens the edges of fear and doubt. It opens a space where healing can begin, where clarity dawns, where peace settles like morning dew. This story invites us to remember our own breath, to recognize it as the bell that sounds within us, constant and clear, even when the world is noisy and chaotic, to listen for that breath in moments of overwhelm, to rest in its steady vibration, to trust its ancient wisdom. Like the bell, our breath connects us to the present moment, to the flow of existence, to the infinite that cradles us all. So when you feel scattered or lost, recall the bell's toll, the gentle call to return, to breathe, to be. Let its sound be a guide, a balm, a light, and in its echo, find the luminous stillness that is always waiting, always near, always here. A single feather floats effortlessly on the wind, carried without struggle across open skies, over mountains and rivers, through forests and fields. Its path is not directed by intention, but by the currents of air, invisible yet palpable, guiding it gently and unpredictably. The feather neither fights nor clings. It surrenders fully to the flow, moving as part of a greater dance beyond its own will. This image is a quiet meditation on surrender and presence. The feather on the wind, fragile yet free, light yet full of movement. It reminds us that there is a profound strength in yielding, and a deep peace in allowing ourselves to be carried by forces greater than our own desire for control. In the Zen tradition, such images serve as invitations to contemplate the nature of being, how we navigate the balance between effort and ease, between holding on and letting go. The feather, though delicate, embodies the wisdom of adaptation. It moves with grace because it accepts the wind's direction, finding freedom not in resisting but in flowing. Life often feels like a gale, unexpected challenges, shifting circumstances, turbulent emotions. We instinctively try to anchor ourselves, to hold steady against the gusts. Yet this story teaches that true steadiness arises not from rigidity, but from a supple heart, one that can bend without breaking. Imagine the feather's journey, sometimes rising high in a warm-up draft, sometimes dipping low as the wind shifts, sometimes spinning in circles before catching a new current. Each motion is unique, unpredictable, but always part of the whole movement of the air. So too are our lives, shaped by unseen currents. We may feel tossed or carried, uncertain where the path will lead. Yet, like the feather, we can learn to trust the flow, to soften our grip, to embrace the mystery of movement without resistance. There is a luminous stillness in this surrender, a paradox where movement and calm coexist. The feather does not stop, it moves with the wind. And yet, there is a quiet presence in its flight, a delicate awareness of the moment unfolding. This story invites us to become like that feather, to embody lightness, to trust the invisible guidance that carries us, and to find grace in uncertainty. To let go of the need to command every step, and instead listen deeply to the breath of life around us. The feather on the wind teaches that freedom is not about escaping the storm, but learning to move through it with openness and trust. It encourages us to see that our journey is less about destination and more about how we flow, how we respond, how we carry ourselves through the currents of existence. And in that flow there is a restorative warmth, a reassurance that we are supported even when the path is unseen, that we are part of a greater dance, held by the unseen arms of the wind. As you breathe in this story, imagine yourself as the feather, light, free, responsive, endlessly carried by the breath of the world. Feel the weightlessness of surrender and the glimmers of awe in the flight. Know that even in moments of turbulence, you are moving with grace, becoming one with the infinite wind. There was once a story told of a man who traveled far across villages and mountains, seeking a place to rest and share his wisdom. He carried little but the quiet kindness in his eyes and the gentle strength in his hands. When he arrived at a crowded inn, he found the last seat taken, a small corner where the light was dim and the floor uneven. Without hesitation, he offered his place to a weary traveler who had just arrived, making no claim to comfort or prestige. The man sat instead on the floor, his back against the cool wall, a smile touching his lips as he welcomed the stranger into the warmth of that space. This simple act, the giving of place, became a mirror for compassion's paradox. The man's generosity was not grand or loud, but subtle and profound. He did not gain a seat. Instead, he found a deeper space within himself. In Zen teaching, compassion is not an abstract virtue, but a living paradox. It asks us to give without expecting return, to open when it feels easier to close, to lose ourselves in order to be found. The one who gave his place reminds us that true generosity is less about the object offered and more about the spirit in which it is given. Often, we think of giving as a transaction, a movement from abundance to need, but compassion in its deepest form transcends scarcity and possession. It flows from the understanding that all places belong to all beings, that to give space is to acknowledge the shared ground beneath our separate footsteps. Imagine the scene in that crowded inn. The clamor of voices, the clatter of dishes, the dance of candlelight on walls, and in the midst of it, a quiet offering, a place given, a presence made room for. This act, those small ripples outward, like a stone dropped in still water. It teaches that by relinquishing our claim, by bending toward others, we open the way to connection, to healing, to peace. In life, we often cling to our seats, our roles, our comforts, our rights, fearful that giving will leave us empty. Yet the story shows us the opposite, that generosity creates abundance where scarcity seemed to rule. The one who gave his place did not lose. He gained something invisible but real, a freedom that comes from letting go, a richness born of openness. This teaching carries a restorative warmth, a reminder that kindness need not be grand to be transformative, that every small gesture of giving can be a doorway into the infinite. Compassion in paradox is an invitation to meet ourselves and others beyond the limits of ego, beyond the fences of ownership and separation. It asks us to see the shared humanity beneath every claim to space, to recognize that when we give, we are also receiving. As you hear this story, reflect on the places you hold tight, the seats you protect, the roles you guard. What might happen if, just once, you offered your place with an open heart? What space would that create? What light would enter? The one who gave his place walks among us still, in every act of kindness, in every moment of surrender to connection. May this story carry you gently toward that place of generosity within, where compassion and paradox meet in quiet harmony. In the heart of winter, when the world is stripped bare and cold, there stands an apple tree, its branches skeletal against the grey sky, its leaves long fallen, its fruit seemingly gone with the warmth of the season. The tree appears dormant, a silent sentinel holding its breath through the frost and snow. Yet, among the stark limbs, a single apple remains, bright, red, defiant, glowing like a small flame against the pale backdrop. This lone apple is a paradox, a beacon of life in apparent stillness. It embodies the quiet resilience that Zen calls us to notice, the strength that persists not through force, but through steady presence in the midst of apparent emptiness. The story of the apple tree in winter invites us to contemplate compassion in paradox, how warmth can exist in cold, how fullness can dwell in seeming emptiness, how generosity can be found in withholding. Imagine the tree through the seasons, the lushness of spring, the abundance of summer, the harvest of autumn, and then the quiet withdrawal into winter's embrace. The tree does not force fruit to appear in the cold, nor does it mourn what is no longer visible. It simply is rooted, patient waiting. That single apple hanging on the branch is not a failure to fall, but a gift. A reminder that life's cycles are not only about growth and harvest, but also about endurance and grace in stillness. In our own lives, winter arrives in many forms: loss, loneliness, hardship, silence. We may feel barren, stripped of vitality and hope. Yet within that winter, there can be a profound compassion, an acceptance of what is, without rushing toward what should be. The apple's presence in winter challenges our assumptions about giving and receiving. It does not give fruit freely in abundance, nor does it withhold out of selfishness. It simply holds one gift quietly, waiting for the moment when warmth returns and the cycle begins anew. This story encourages us to see compassion not only as action but as being, holding space for ourselves and others through seasons of hardship, recognizing that sometimes the greatest generosity is the patience to endure, the willingness to be present without change. Like the tree, we may not always be called to bloom or to bear fruit. Sometimes our strength lies in our stillness, our openness to the cold and the quiet, and the tender keeping of what is precious, even if unseen. There is a restorative warmth in this waiting, a deep knowing that beneath the surface, life continues in ways invisible to the eye. The apple in winter is a symbol of hope without haste, of grace without effort, of compassion that does not demand but simply is. As you hold this story in your mind, may it soften your edges. May it remind you to carry your own stillness with kindness, to honor the quiet seasons within yourself and those around you. May you find comfort in the paradox of life's rhythms, the giving and the withholding, the blooming and the waiting, the light and the shadow. And may the single apple's quiet glow illuminate your path through any winter, warming you with the gentle promise of spring. There is a quiet path winding through a forest, where the soft sound of footsteps blends with the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind. It is said that one evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, two sets of footsteps appeared side by side, one familiar, the other a stranger's. Neither sought to lead, nor to follow. They moved in harmony, the pace steady and unhurried. The stranger's steps were light but certain, a rhythm that invited trust. The familiar footsteps, long accustomed to the path, felt an unexpected lightness in the company. This story of the stranger's footsteps is a delicate meditation on compassion in paradox, the meeting of self and other, the blending of solitude and connection. It reminds us that in the presence of a stranger, there can be a profound openness, a space where compassion unfolds naturally, beyond words or expectation. Imagine walking alone in the quiet of a forest. Your steps are your own, marked by the rhythm of your breath and the weight of your body. Suddenly, beside you, another set of footsteps appears. They do not interrupt or crowd. They simply accompany, a gentle echo in the stillness. In this companionship without possession, we glimpse the essence of compassion, not as obligation, but as spontaneous presence. The stranger's footsteps are neither intrusion nor distance. They are an invitation to share the path, to walk together without claim or condition. Zen teaches us that every stranger is a mirror, reflecting parts of ourselves we may have forgotten or hidden. The footsteps beside ours call us to recognize the interconnectedness that threads through all beings, to soften the boundaries that separate I from you. There is a fragile beauty in this encounter, the vulnerability of opening to another without knowing, the courage to be seen without expectation, the grace to walk side by side without grasping. In life, we meet many strangers, some passing, some lingering. They come bearing their own footsteps, their own stories, their own silences. When we welcome them with open hearts, we partake in a sacred exchange where compassion flows effortlessly. The paradox lies in the tension between distance and closeness. We honor the stranger's otherness while recognizing the shared humanity that binds us. We maintain our individuality even as we connect deeply. This story invites us to practice walking with the stranger's footsteps, not just alongside others, but within ourselves. To notice the unfamiliar parts of our own being, to approach them with curiosity and kindness, to remember that within every solitary step, there is a potential for companionship. Within every moment of aloneness, an opening to connection. As you listen, feel the rhythm of your own footsteps, steady, alive, unfolding. Imagine a new set joining yours, soft, welcoming, and free. Let this image soften your heart, expand your compassion, and deepen your presence. The stranger's footsteps remind us that we are never truly alone on the path, that in every step shared, there is a whisper of belonging, a glimmer of grace. May this story carry you gently forward, walking with lightness, openness, and warmth. There is a story whispered among the streams and rivers, a tale of water that forgot its shape. Once confined to a vase, the water held itself with form. Limited by the contours of the vessel, it knew its boundaries, its edges, its limits. It was the vase's water defined and contained. But one day, the vase cracked, and the water poured out, spilling onto the earth, flowing freely. It lost its shape entirely, no longer bound by sides or rim. It became river, rain, mist, fluid and formless. This water, once certain and confined, forgot its shape, and in that forgetting found freedom. The story is a profound meditation on compassion in paradox, on the nature of identity and surrender. The water's journey from form to formlessness mirrors our own dance between holding on and letting go, between self-definition and dissolution. Imagine the water resting quietly in the vase, smooth and still, reflecting only what fits within its walls. It is calm but limited. Its beauty is fixed but fragile. The water knows where it ends and begins. Then the crack appears. The boundaries give way. The water spills out, no longer held. It does not resist. It flows. It finds new shapes in streams and puddles, in clouds and waves. It becomes many things and none, all at once. Zen teaches that like this water, we often cling to our identities, our roles, beliefs, fears, and attachments, as if they are the whole of who we are. Yet these are but vessels, temporary forms that contain the infinite. When the water forgets its shape, it remembers something deeper, the essence beyond form, the formless source from which all shapes arise and into which they return. There is a restorative warmth in this forgetting, a letting go that is not loss but liberation. It is the courage to flow beyond the fixed self, to embrace uncertainty and change. This story invites us to reflect on the paradox of compassion, the need to hold ourselves and others tenderly, while also allowing the freedom to transform and dissolve. Compassion is not about clinging tightly, but about creating space. It is about recognizing that true connection arises when we release the need to define, to fix, to control. Imagine yourself as the water, flowing through the landscape of your life. Feel the cracks in the vase, the moments when your boundaries shift or break. Notice the freedom that follows, the gentle unfolding into vastness. Like water, compassion flows most deeply when it forgets its shape, moving effortlessly between forms, nourishing everything it touches without attachment. The water that forgot its shape teaches us to be fluid, responsive, and open, to embrace the paradox of presence and absence, strength and softness, holding and releasing. As you breathe with this story, let it soften the edges of your self-concept. Let it invite you to trust in the formless current beneath all things. And know that in forgetting your shape, you find the boundless compassion that connects us all. In the quiet heart of the temple, there is a space where words cease, where sound dissolves into stillness, a silence so profound it seems to hold the weight of the world itself. This silence is not absence, but presence, an expansive embrace that cradles everything within it. There is a story told of a master and his disciple sitting beneath an ancient pine, the air thick with the scent of earth and time. The disciple, eager for teaching, asked, "Master, how do we find peace amidst the noise of the world?" The master answered not with words, but by gesturing to the silence between their breaths. The unspoken space that held their conversation, the quiet between the rustling leaves, the pause between heartbeats. This silence, the master said softly, is the womb that holds all things. It is the beginning and the end, the fullness that contains emptiness. This silence that held everything is a paradox of compassion, vast and intimate, still and alive, empty and overflowing. It asks us to meet the world not with resistance or reaction, but with openness and acceptance. Imagine the silence as a vast ocean, deep and unchanging beneath the waves of sound and sensation. Within this ocean, every noise is a ripple, every thought a passing cloud. Yet the ocean remains steady, serene. Zen teaches that true compassion arises from this silence, not from words or deeds alone, but from the capacity to hold suffering and joy, chaos and calm, without fragmentation. In moments of stillness, when the mind quiets and the heart softens, we touch this silence. It is a refuge from the relentless chatter, a sanctuary where healing begins. The silence that holds everything is not empty space to be feared, but a sanctuary to be welcomed. It is the invisible thread weaving together all things, the seen and unseen, the spoken and unspoken. This story invites us to cultivate silence within ourselves, to create a space where compassion can arise naturally and freely. It is an invitation to rest in the mystery of being, to trust that within silence lies the power to transform and renew. Consider the silence between words, between breaths, between moments. It is here that presence deepens, that understanding grows, that love flows without effort. As you breathe into this story, feel the restorative warmth of silence enfolding you, holding you gently as you are, whole, fragile, luminous. May this silence be a companion on your journey, a quiet friend who holds all your stories without judgment or hurry. And in that holding, may you find the compassion that transcends words, the peace that surpasses understanding, the infinite grace that is always here, now. Within the quiet sanctuary of the mind, there lies a garden, hidden not behind walls or gates, but nestled beneath the surface of everyday thought. This garden is not planted in soil or watered with rain, but tended in the soft soil of presence, nurtured by breath and quiet attention. It is the garden within. The story goes that a wandering monk, weary from his travels, once paused beside a small temple garden. It was simple, stones arranged with care, moss gently blanketing the earth, a single cherry blossom tree reaching toward the sky. The monk sat quietly, and as he did, he felt the garden shift, not outside, but within himself. The petals of the tree became petals of his own heart, the moss a softness in his own being, the stone's steady roots beneath his feet. This garden within is a place of return, a center that holds us steady amid life's ever-changing seasons. It invites us to pause, to breathe, to witness the tender growth of self-compassion, patience, and clarity. Imagine this inner garden as a sacred space where thoughts do not crowd or command, but flow gently like a stream, where emotions are not storms to withstand, but waters to be observed and accepted, where every breath is a seed, every moment a chance to cultivate peace. Zen teaching encourages us to care for this garden with mindfulness and tenderness, Like tending a real garden, it requires patience, gentleness, and a willingness to clear away what no longer serves, be it weeds of worry, stones of regret, or shadows of doubt. Yet the garden within is not a place of striving or control. It is a living presence that unfolds naturally when we stop pushing against the world and begin to rest in ourselves. It grows not by force but by allowing space for silence, for stillness, for the gentle unfolding of awareness. The garden within reminds us that peace is not found in distant lands or extraordinary events, but in the ordinary, here and now. It is in the soft rustle of leaves, the steady pulse of breath, the quiet kindness extended inward. As the monk discovered, tending the garden within reconnects us to the rhythm of life, its cycles of growth and rest, blossoming and letting go. It grounds us in the truth that we are both gardener and garden, caretaker and cared for. In this sacred inner space, we can find refuge from the noise and rush of life. We can cultivate a restorative warmth, a quiet light that glows steadily, regardless of external circumstance. Allow this story to carry you back to your own garden within. Imagine walking slowly along its paths, feeling the earth beneath your feet, noticing the colors, the textures, the gentle life that surrounds you. Breathe in the fragrance of blossoming compassion, the soft light of understanding, the cool shade of acceptance. Know that this garden is always here, waiting to receive you, to hold you, to remind you of your true nature. As you nurture this inner sanctuary, may you find yourself returning again and again to the center, a place of stillness, strength, and restorative grace. In the quiet hours of dawn, when the world is still veiled in mist, there exists a bridge unlike any other. It is a bridge made not of stone or wood, but of fog, ethereal, shifting, barely there. To step upon it is to walk between worlds, to move through the invisible, to trust in the delicate balance between what is seen and what is felt. There is a story told of a traveler who arrived at the edge of a deep valley, where the only crossing was this bridge of fog. The traveler hesitated, for the bridge seemed to shimmer and dissolve with every step. Yet the valley called, and the traveler began to walk, slowly, attentively, aware of each footfall upon the mist. With each step, the fog shifted, forming beneath the traveler's feet just enough to hold, just enough to guide. The bridge was never solid, never certain, yet it was real, an invitation to trust in the unknown. This bridge made of fog is a metaphor for the journey back to the center, the path within that is always present, but often hidden by the clutter of our lives. It speaks of faith in the intangible, the courage to move forward without clear footing, the grace to embrace uncertainty as a form of wisdom. In Zen, the journey inward is often described as a crossing, leaving behind old patterns, familiar comforts, and the illusions of control to step into a space where clarity is found not in solidity, but in openness. Imagine the bridge as the threshold between the world of distraction and the realm of presence. It cannot be seen with the eyes alone, nor measured by the mind. It is felt in the body, intuited in the heart, a fragile path woven from awareness itself. Walking this bridge requires letting go, not of destination, but of the need for certainty. It calls us to surrender the urge to know, and instead to experience, moment by moment, the unfolding of what is. The traveler's footsteps echo softly on the mist, a quiet rhythm of trust and attentiveness. Each step dissolves the fog behind, yet reveals more ahead, a paradox of loss and discovery. This story invites us to consider our own crossings. How often do we wait for a solid path before moving forward? How often do we resist the fog, fearing it will fail to hold us? Yet, like the traveler, we are called to walk anyway, to find support in the unseen, to become the bridge itself, a living presence of lightness and strength, of mystery and grace. The bridge made of fog teaches us that the center we seek is not a place of permanence, but a state of openness. It is not a fixed point, but a continuous unfolding, a dance between presence and absence, form and emptiness. As you breathe with this story, feel the mist beneath your feet, the tender uncertainty, the luminous possibility. Allow yourself to trust in the fragile beauty of the crossing. May this tale carry you gently back to your own center, encouraging you to walk with quiet courage, with soft awareness, with a heart open to the infinite. In the end, the bridge is not something to be crossed and left behind. It is the very path of awakening, ever present, ever shifting, always here. Beneath the vast expanse of the open sky, there lies a mirror, not of glass or metal, but of still water. This mirror reflects the boundless heavens above, capturing clouds, sunlight, and the endless dance of light and shadow. It does so without effort or judgment, simply receiving, holding, and revealing all that passes over its surface. There is a story from a remote monastery where a novice sat by a quiet lake, pondering the nature of self and world. The master approached and asked, "What do you see?" The novice replied, "I see the sky, the clouds, the trees, all reflected in the water." The master smiled and said, "Look again. Is it the sky that is reflected, or the water that holds the sky?" This mirror of the sky becomes a profound metaphor for the nature of our own awareness, a luminous, spacious presence that holds all experience without clinging or resistance. Like the lake, our consciousness can reflect the world clearly, while remaining fundamentally unchanged beneath the surface. Zen teaches that this clarity is our true nature, beyond the fleeting images of thought and emotion. It is the space in which all appearances arise and dissolve, the infinite canvas of being that remains open and vast. Imagine yourself as that mirror, serene and deep. The clouds, your thoughts and feelings, move across your surface, ever changing. Sometimes they gather thickly, obscuring the sky. Sometimes they drift lightly, casting gentle shadows. But beneath them all, the water remains still and whole. This story invites us to rest in that stillness, to recognize that our essence is not defined by the reflections we see, but by the openness that receives them. In daily life, it is easy to become caught in the turbulence of emotions and ideas, mistaking them for the self. The mirror of the sky reminds us that these are temporary, passing phenomena, while our awareness remains constant and clear. There is a restorative warmth in this realization, a gentle freedom from identification and grasping. To know oneself as the mirror is to find a sanctuary within, a place where peace is not sought but discovered. As you listen, breathe softly into this space of awareness. Feel the expansiveness beneath the ripples of your mind. Let the vastness of the sky settle into your being. May this story carry you gently back to your center, reminding you that beneath all change, you are the still mirror, open, radiant, endlessly receptive. And in that reception, find the deep clarity and relaxation that nourishes the soul. There is a delicate sound, barely audible, that lives beneath the words we speak, the whisper beneath the words. It is not language, not meaning, not even thought. It is the soft current of presence that flows quietly through every breath, every pause, every moment when speech dissolves into silence. A story from a remote mountain monastery tells of a student who asked his teacher, "Master, how can I understand the truth beyond words?" The master smiled and replied, "Listen not to the words, but to the space between them. Hear the whisper beneath the words." The student sat silently, trying to hear this whisper. At first, he found only the echo of his own voice. But as he quieted, he began to notice the stillness, the subtle vibration that carried the words without binding them. The whisper was the thread that connected all meaning, the breath that animated silence. This whisper beneath the words is a metaphor for the deeper dimension of awareness, the luminous presence that underlies all experience. It reminds us that what truly matters often lies beyond the surface of language, beyond the grasp of thought. Zen teaches that words are like leaves on a stream, beautiful, varied, passing. But the stream itself, the whisper beneath, is steady, flowing alive. Imagine a conversation where the words fade, and what remains is the gentle current of connection, the silent understanding that does not require explanation. This is the essence of compassion, the ability to hold another's presence without needing to fill the space with answers or judgments. The whisper beneath the words invites us to listen with our whole being, to attend not only to what is said, but to what is not said, to the pauses, the breath, the silence that enfolds speech. In daily life, this means cultivating a presence that is patient and open, that allows space for others and ourselves to be seen and heard beyond the clamor of noise. There is a restorative warmth in this listening, a quiet embrace that nourishes the soul and eases the restless mind. As you breathe with this story, notice the spaces between your own thoughts and words. Feel the whisper that carries your breath, your heartbeat, your awareness. May this whisper guide you gently back to the center, a place of calm clarity where compassion arises naturally beyond language and form. And in that stillness, may you find a deep and abiding peace. There is a story whispered softly in the quiet moments between waking and dreaming, a story of the home you never left. It is not a place you travel to, nor a destination marked on any map. It is the steady center beneath all movement, the unchanging sanctuary beneath the shifting seasons of life. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast forest, feeling both the pull of the unknown and the call to return. Yet, as you take a step, you realize that the path leads not outward, but inward, to a space within you that has always been there, patiently waiting. This story invites us to remember that beneath the layers of thought, emotion, and experience, there lies a home that is not built of bricks or memories, but of presence itself. It is the silent heart of awareness, vast and luminous, untouched by time or change. Zen teachings often speak of returning to this home, not as a journey of distance, but as an unfolding of recognition. To come back is not to arrive at a new place, but to awaken to what has never been lost. Consider the metaphor of a traveler who sets out in search of a distant city, only to discover that the city was within them all along. The journey outward was necessary, for it stirred the longing, opened the eyes, and softened the heart. But the arrival is always a coming home. In the stillness of this home, we find rest beyond striving, peace beyond turmoil. It is a place where the mind's chatter quiets and the heart opens wide. Here, the illusions of separation dissolve, revealing the deep interconnectedness of all things. The home you never left is a refuge in times of uncertainty, a wellspring of strength when the world feels heavy. It reminds us that we are never truly lost, only temporarily unaware of our true nature. As you breathe into this story, feel the gentle warmth of this inner sanctuary. Notice how it holds you effortlessly, without demand or expectation. It does not judge or change, it simply is. This home is the foundation beneath all experience, the silent witness to joy and sorrow alike. It embraces the paradox of life, both ever changing and eternally present. May you carry this awareness with you as a quiet light, guiding you through the days ahead. When storms arise, remember that you are anchored here, in the home you never left, and in that knowing, find a restorative peace that nourishes your soul deeply and endlessly. When a story reaches its final breath, it does not vanish into silence or disappear into shadow. Instead, it folds gently into the vast tapestry of being, becoming a whisper carried by the wind, a trace in the soil, a spark resting quietly beneath the surface of awareness. The stories we hear and live through are not confined to beginnings and endings. They flow onward in currents both seen and unseen. There is a teaching in Zen that speaks of this very mystery, where the stories go when they end. A student once asked his master, "Master, when a story finishes, where does it go?" The master smiled, eyes deep with knowing, and replied, "It becomes the space between the stars. It is the silence that holds the song, This answer invites us to consider endings not as final, but as transformations. Stories do not conclude and cease. They dissolve their forms and merge into the silence that underlies all sound. They become the fertile ground from which new stories arise, the stillness that breathes life into the next moment. Imagine a river flowing to the sea. The river's waters are ever changing, yet the river itself persists, carrying all it has gathered into a vast openness. The stories we hear, the moments we live, are like droplets in that flow, distinct yet inseparable from the whole. In the quiet finality of a story's end, there is a deep invitation to rest not in what has passed, but in the spaciousness that remains. It is here, in this open expanse, that the soul finds room to breathe, to heal, to imagine again. Zen reminds us that the space between thoughts, the silence after words, is not empty but alive, with possibility, with connection, with presence. When we listen deeply, we begin to hear the whispers beneath the stories, the echoes that linger, the feelings that touch us, the insights that unfold slowly like dawn. These echoes are the true home of stories, beyond plot, beyond characters, beyond time. They are the threads that weave us together, the shared breath that unites all beings. As you rest in this final stillness, allow the stories you have heard to settle softly within you. Let them become part of the quiet landscape of your heart, a gentle light that glows without needing to shine. Know that endings are beginnings, that the silence holding your story now is the very essence of life's unfolding. And in this knowing, find a restorative warmth that wraps around you like a soft cloak, comforting, enduring, infinite. The stories go where the stars go, where the wind goes, where the breath goes, into the vast, mysterious embrace of all that is. As we come to the gentle close of this journey together, there is a quiet gratitude that rises, not only for the stories shared, but for the open hearts that have listened, the stillness that has been held, the space that has been created between words and breath. Thank you for listening with your heart. In Zen, listening is more than hearing. It is a deep, unspoken communion, a tender attention that transcends language. To listen with the heart is to meet each moment fully, to embrace silence and sound alike, to hold presence without grasping or resistance. Imagine the ripple of a single drop in a vast lake. Though small, it reaches far, touching the shores, stirring life beneath the surface. Your listening has been such a ripple, quietly expanding, touching the unseen currents of connection and understanding. There is a story of a master who, when asked how to teach, simply said, "I listen." This simple truth reveals the essence of wisdom, that to truly teach, to truly heal, we must first listen with kindness, without agenda, without expectation. Your openness has allowed the stories to breathe, to take root, to flower, to offer nourishment beyond the surface of words. In this shared stillness, a sacred space has been formed, a space where transformation unfolds softly, where the flicker of insight can grow into steady light. Thank you for being part of this unfolding, for offering your presence as a gift, not just to these stories, but to yourself. May the echoes of this listening continue to resonate within you, whispering reminders of peace, compassion, and clarity. May you carry this restorative warmth into your days, allowing it to guide you gently through challenges and joys alike. And may your heart remain open, always ready to listen, always ready to receive the quiet wisdom that flows through every moment. As the last breath of this narration settles, know that what has been shared lives beyond these words, in you, around you, and within the infinite unfolding of life. Thank you for listening with your heart.